My name is Victoria. I'm 32 years old. The first sound I heard was my mother's suitcase dragging across my hardwood floor at 5:41 inches the morning. Slow, confident, annoyed. Like the house itself had offended her by daring to exist under her luggage. I was standing in the kitchen in my socks, holding a manila envelope I had taken out of my desk drawer before sunrise. The coffee on the warming plate had burned down into something bitter and dark. Lemon cleaner still clung to the counters from the night before. Pale morning light cut across the dining table and caught the edge of the paper in my hand. Then my mother came around the corner, robe tied tight, church mug in one hand, suitcase handle in the other. She looked at me, then at the envelope, then at the dining room like she was already deciding what furniture should stay after I was gone. Good, she said. You're awake. Saves me from having to leave a note. I set the envelope on the table and watched her drag the suitcase another foot. The wheels squealed. The wood answered back. I called your cousin Denise last night, she said. She said you can stay with her for a while if you stop being difficult. I just looked at her. Not because I was shocked. Shock had run out years ago. After 22 years of this, shock had dried up and turned into something cleaner. Something colder. Something with edges. You need a reset, Victoria, she said. You've become impossible in this house. In this house. That was the phrase. In this house. Like I was some guest who had overstayed. Like I was a moody niece she had taken in. Like I had not paid the mortgage every month since I was old enough to have one. She moved past the family photos lining the wall. The same arrangement she had insisted on for years. My grandparents at Thanksgiving. My father in a navy polo with one hand on my shoulder. Me at 10. Then 16. Then 21. And her, always centered. Always positioned like the pillar. I reached into the envelope and slid one sheet onto the dining table. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough for the paper to whisper over the wood. Her eyes dropped. Then came back to me. She still didn't understand what she was looking at. That was all right. I had waited long enough to enjoy the pace. What is that? She asked. Something you should have asked about a long time ago. She took one more step toward the table, still holding the mug, still standing in my kitchen like she owned sunrise. What people do to you for years becomes their version of history. That is the ugliest part. Not the insult. Not even the control. The editing. By the time I was 12, my mother could tell a story where she was the one carrying all the weight, even while I was the one learning how to shrink so she could keep her balance. By the time I was 18, half our family thought I was lucky she let me live with her. By the time I was 32, church women, who had never paid one bill in my home, would pat my arm at Christmas and say, "Be patient with your mama. It's hard for older women to share space." Share. That word used to make me laugh in private. Nothing in that house had ever been shared. It had been directed, managed, claimed, occupied. When I was 10, my father died on a Thursday in late October. Heart attack. No warning. He had gone to Walmart for windshield wipers and a gallon of milk and never made it home. One minute, he was texting me a joke about my science project volcano. The next minute, I was in a hospital family room with a paper cup of apple juice sweating in my hand while a social worker asked if someone was coming to stay with us. The world split cleanly in half that day. Before him. After him. My father was steady in a way people too often mistake for ordinary. He was not loud. He was not a grand speech man. He did not perform love for a room. He handled things. Insurance forms. Property tax deadlines. Car repairs. The weird smell under the sink. The back door lock that stuck in winter. He knew where every receipt lived and every document slept. And he knew my mother. Better than anyone. Better, maybe, than she knew herself. He and my grandfather had bought that house through a structure that made absolutely no sense to me at 10 and perfect sense to me at 32. Years earlier, my father's sister had gotten caught in a probate mess over another property, and my grandfather never forgot it. He stopped believing in handshakes and sentiment after that. He trusted paper. He trusted signatures. He trusted county records more than tears. So, after my father had his first health scare, 3 years before he died, the house was placed under a protected transfer arrangement. I didn't know the full shape of it then. I only knew this. After the funeral, my mother cried into people's coats, squeezed my hand in public, and told everyone we would somehow keep the house. She said it like we were both passengers. What she did not say was that the house had already been secured. For me, county clerk, transfer recorded, not in spirit, not in promise, in ink. About 6 months later, my grandfather sat me down with an attorney named Mr. Dobbins and a box of tissues I never touched. He explained it carefully. Slow enough for a child, exact enough for a courtroom. The house had been transferred into a trust with me as beneficiary and eventual legal owner, with protections in place until I turned 18. My grandfather would act as trustee for a time. Then ownership would finalize in my name under the terms my father had set up. My mother had residency rights while I was a minor. After that, she had no ownership claim. He told me my father had wanted one thing above all else, that no one could ever uproot me from my own home. Not by debt, not by panic, not by marriage, not by guilt. Your father knew your mother loved comfort more than stability, Mr. Dobbins said quietly. He wanted to make sure you were never asked to become the cost of hers. I was 11, grieving, angry, too young for adult sentences that permanent. I signed nothing that day. There was nothing to sign. The adults had already done the thing that mattered. My mother knew parts of it, not all of it. She knew my grandfather had put things in order. She knew there were legal protections. She knew she could stay. What she either never understood or never wanted to understand was the single detail that mattered most. Staying is not owning. A roof can protect you and still belong to someone else. But my mother had a talent for standing somewhere long enough that other people started mistaking her shadow for the walls. At first, everybody spoke in temporary language. 1 year. Stabilize. Get through the worst of it. Then, 1 year became 3 because she said she was not emotionally ready to downsize. 3 became 6 because her jewelry inventory in the garage was finally picking up. 6 became 9 because I was in high school and then applying to colleges and, according to her, it would be cruel to start discussing living arrangements while I was already under stress. 9 became 12 because I stayed local for community college first, then state school, and suddenly it was best for the family to keep the house centered around her routines. Centered around her. That phrase never failed to irritate me. Our lives orbited her moods like weather. If she wanted lemon curtains, we had lemon curtains. If she decided Thanksgiving would be at our house, then Thanksgiving was at our house, with me cleaning for 3 days while she told everybody how exhausted she was from hosting. If she didn't want my cousin's boyfriend there because he had tattoos, then somehow it became about the tone of the evening. If she wanted the guest room repainted, I paid for Sherwin-Williams paint, hired the guy from Angie's List, and listened to her stand in the hallway saying, "Maybe eggshell, not satin." By 22, I was working full-time at a regional medical billing company and finishing school at night. By 24, I was carrying everything. Mortgage autopay, property insurance, water, electric, HOA fees, the emergency plumber when a pipe burst the week before Christmas, the roof repair after the spring storm ripped shingles off the garage, the new refrigerator when the old one died on July 3rd with half the barbecue groceries rotting inside it. At first, I kept every statement and receipt in a fireproof box in my closet. Later, I moved it all into a locked filing cabinet because I finally understood that closets are still visible to people who think your privacy is just another drawer in their house. Every month, I paid. Every month, my mother told somebody else how hard it was to keep everything together. For a long time, I used to wonder if she believed herself. Then I stopped wasting my energy on that question. Belief was never the point. Control was. She did not need facts to feel entitled. She only needed habit. And an audience. People think emotional control always looks like screaming. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it looks exactly like that. But sometimes it is smaller, sharper, meaner because it passes as normal. Sometimes it is your mother reloading the dishwasher after you already loaded it because you never do anything right, even though you are the one who bought the detergent. Sometimes it is her opening your mail and setting it on the counter already slit because I assumed it was another utility bill. Sometimes it is her telling your aunt, right in front of you, Victoria means well, but she's not practical. When you are the one who just spent 3 hours on the phone with insurance because a tree root cracked the front walkway. Sometimes it is her telling the church prayer circle that you are still figuring life out when you have a 780 credit score and a notarized copy of the deed in your desk. People only notice bruises they already know how to name. I had a house full of fingerprints nobody else ever called damage. When I was 26, a man I dated for 8 months asked why I never wanted him to come inside when he dropped me off. I laughed, said I was private, said I liked keeping work and home separate. The truth was uglier than that. I didn't want him meeting my mother in one of her silk robes at 8 o'clock at night and hearing her say, "We don't usually have visitors on weeknights," like she was the woman on the lease and I was a teenager sneaking somebody in past curfew. One Christmas, my coworker Megan came by with peppermint bark and a Starbucks gift card after I covered her shift all week. My mother got to the door before I could. She smiled that polished smile she used whenever strangers were present. Then she said, "Victoria's upstairs. She still lives here while she gets on her feet." On her feet. I had just paid $8,700 for a new HVAC unit. I had paid the county taxes 2 weeks earlier. I had replaced the rotten fence on the east side because the HOA had sent a violation notice. But in my mother's version of events, I was still drifting around the edges of adulthood, tolerated by her grace. I carried that humiliation like a second spine. Straight. Hidden. Always there. There are daughters who fight early. There are daughters who leave. There are daughters who burn the whole thing down at 19 and never look back. I understand them. I envy them. That was not me. I stayed because my father had died inside that life and I could not bear to leave the one thing he had made secure for me. I stayed because my grandfather was getting older and every time he squeezed my hand in the probate courthouse hallway, he said the same thing. Hold your ground. Paper outlasts performance. I stayed because some girls are trained so young to keep the peace that by the time they realize peace was never actually available to them, they are already experts in surviving war quietly. And if I am being completely honest, I stayed because some stupid, hopeful part of me kept waiting for her to soften. One day she would tell the truth. One day she would look around and say it plainly. This is Victoria's house. I'm grateful she let me stay. I waited years for a sentence that never came. Instead, she got older. And more certain. The longer people let a lie breathe, the stronger it starts to look. By the time I was 29, my mother had convinced half the family she was the matriarch of a property she did not own. She called contractors, rejected tile samples, referred to the backyard as my land. At a 4th of July barbecue, I heard her tell a neighbor, "When I finally redo this patio, I'm extending the pavers." I was standing there holding a tray of burger buns from Costco, staring at her sandals on bricks I had paid to reseal. She never flinched. That is the kind of confidence people develop when nobody has ever made them finish a lie all the way to the paperwork. The first time she crossed a line, I almost stopped her. Thanksgiving. 3 years ago. Turkey in the oven. Football on in the den. My brother-in-law asleep in a recliner. My cousin Denise was talking about the rental market in Phoenix, and my mother patted her wrist and said, "Families should think long-term. When this house is mine to pass on, I'll make sure it goes where it matters." I looked up from the gravy boat. Denise looked from her to me, then away. Nobody said anything. My mother just kept slicing pie. That moment stayed under my skin for months. Not because it was new, Because it was public. Because she had started touching the future like it belonged to her. After that, I made an appointment with Mr. Dobbins. He was older by then. A little smaller somehow. Still precise. Still smelled faintly like legal pads and peppermint. I brought copies of everything. Mortgage history, tax records, insurance, repair invoices, screenshots of bank drafts. He reviewed them with that dry attorney patience, then leaned back in his chair and looked at me over his glasses. "You have been subsidizing a fiction," he said. "I know. Do you want it corrected?" he asked. "Or do you want it ended?" It took me a while to answer, because those are not the same thing. Correction is for misunderstandings. Endings are for patterns. I said, "I want it documented." He nodded like that was the wiser answer. Maybe it was. We updated everything. Fresh certified copies. Current property record from the county clerk. Trust summary. Ownership chain. Tax certification. He had me put certain notices in writing in case I ever needed them. Then he asked one question that stayed with me. "Has she ever paid rent?" I almost laughed. "No, never. Not once. Not a check. Not a transfer. Not even 1 month where she paid the water bill without turning it into a speech for 6 other people." So we documented that too. His paralegal typed. Stamped. Filed. On one page, near the bottom, sat the reference that would later cut through 22 years of theater. County Clerk Case. Number 2, 1024-1, 7823. Paper does not care who hosted Easter. Paper does not care who cried louder at funerals. Paper does not care who stood in the middle of the photo. That is why people like my mother hate it when paper enters the room. For another year, I said nothing. Not because I was weak, because timing matters. A quiet woman with proof is not the same thing as a defeated woman. Sometimes she is just choosing the cleanest place to end you. The final trigger came in March. Saturday afternoon. Rain on the windows. Cold air sneaking in under the mudroom door because the seal needed replacing. I was in the dining room paying the quarterly pest control invoice when I heard voices in the entryway. Women's voices. Bright. Perfumed. That fake church lady laugh that always sounds like judgment wearing lip gloss. I looked up and saw my mother bringing in 2 women from church and a man in a navy blazer carrying a leather folder. He looked like a realtor before he even introduced himself. "Victoria, perfect," my mother said. "We're just doing a quick walkthrough." I stood up slowly. "A walkthrough of what?" The man gave me a careful smile. "Hi, I'm Erin. Your mother said you were aware she was exploring options for a future listing." Future listing. I remember every detail of that moment. The wet umbrella leaning against my hall table. The smell of rain and cheap floral perfume. The little click my laptop made when the screen timed out. My mother crossed her arms. "I told you last week this house is too much for both of us now." She had told me no such thing. She had complained about the upstairs bathroom grout. That was not the same. "You brought a realtor into my house?" She gave that short, dismissive laugh like I was embarrassing myself in front of company. "There you go again. Your attitude is exactly why things have become so strained." Erin looked uncomfortable. One of the church women stared up the staircase like it was holy to witness a public correction. "I've decided it's time to simplify," my mother said. "Sell this place, split what needs splitting, and move somewhere I'll finally have peace." Split what needs splitting. Something inside me went very still. Not hollow. Still. That kind of stillness is dangerous when it lands in the right person. "You've decided?" I asked. "Yes." "Without asking me?" "Victoria, please, don't do this in front of guests." Guests. That word again. Like I was the disruption. Like the owner was the embarrassing one. Aaron cleared his throat. "Maybe we can circle back when—" "No," my mother said. "We're here now. Let's keep moving." And then she did the thing that killed whatever softness I still had left. She turned to the church women and said, casually, almost sweetly, "She's been living under me so long she confuses contribution with authority." Contribution with authority. My face didn't move, but something old in me shut its eyes and never opened them again. I let them do the walkthrough. That is the part I am proud of. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not snatch business cards or start throwing bank records across the foyer like confetti. I stood in the doorway and let my mother narrate room sizes, upgrades, and future plans for a property she had never legally touched. She told Aaron the upstairs bedroom could be staged as a flex office. She told him the roof was about 7 years old, even though I had the repair documents in a folder labeled 2022 exterior. She told him the kitchen cabinets had been repainted when I redid the room, even though I had paid for every gallon and spent my PTO days meeting the contractor. The two church women followed her room to room like witnesses to a coronation. And I let them, because arrogance becomes useful once it has enough spectators. When they left, Aaron slipped his card onto the foyer table and mouthed, "Sorry." I nodded once. My mother waited until the front door shut. Then she turned on me. "You embarrassed me. You brought a realtor here. Because somebody has to make adult decisions. Interesting. Do not get smart with me in my own house." I looked at her for a long second. Then at the foyer mirror behind her, where we stood reflected exactly as we were. Her in soft pink, still pretty from the outside, still held together by habit. Me in black leggings and an old University of Washington sweatshirt. Tired. Done. "Say that again," I said. "What?" "The part where this is your house." She rolled her eyes like I was testing her patience for sport. "I am not doing one of your moods tonight." Then she picked up Aaron's card and dropped it into the ceramic bowl where she kept takeout menus, junk mail, and expired Bed Bath & Beyond coupons like they all had equal value. I slept 3 hours that night. Not because I was upset, because I was preparing. Sunday morning, I drove downtown before church traffic thickened. Courthouse parking garage. Level 3. I wore jeans, a navy sweater, and the expression women wear when they are finally too tired to stay frightened. At the county clerk's office, I requested certified copies. Again, the clerk behind the glass had teal nails and a voice worn flat from repeating the same sentence all day. "Property address?" I gave it. She typed, printed, stamped. Then the machine came down with that hard metallic seal. A beautiful sound. Final. Certain. I paid the fee and slid the papers into a new envelope. Then I drove to Mr. Dobbins's office. He reviewed my notice language one more time and called a colleague who handled formal tenancy termination paperwork. We prepared everything. Notice to vacate. Recorded ownership copies. Timeline. Instructions for service if she refused voluntary departure. I did not want a war. I wanted a boundary with teeth. By Tuesday, the situation got bigger without me touching it. My mother had already started calling family. That was her mistake. She called Denise. She called her brother. She called two women from church. She even called my older half-brother in Arizona, who had not spent more than 2 nights in that house in 15 years, but suddenly felt fully qualified to lecture me about respecting your mother. By Wednesday, I had 3 voicemails and 7 texts implying I had become unstable, ungrateful, and difficult lately. One line from my uncle stood out. "Your mama says you're trying to force her out of the house she built." Built. It would have been funny if it wasn't such a perfect sentence for her. She had built nothing. She had occupied expertly. Those are not the same thing. I replied to no one. Instead, I invited them. Saturday, 2 o'clock. Family discussion at the house. Please come if you would like clarity. No emojis. No details. No drama. My mother saw the thread on Denise's phone Friday evening when Denise stopped by, and she stormed into the kitchen waving outrage like a flag. What is this supposed to be? I was labeling freezer containers with a Sharpie. Clarity. You do not summon people into my home over some tantrum. Then it's a good thing this isn't your home. Her mouth opened, closed. That was the first time I had ever said it to her face without hiding it inside implication. Plain. Direct. No cushion. She stared at me like she had just heard a lamp insult her. You have lost your mind. No, I said. I found the paperwork. She laughed, but it came out thin. Then she reached for her oldest trick. Moral debt. After everything I did for you. There it was. The sentence she had spent decades cashing in. After everything I did for you, fed you, raised you, stayed, sacrificed. As if motherhood was a mortgage I owed interest on forever. As if my father dying had turned me into her reimbursement plan for life. You lived here for 22 years without paying for the roof over your head. She slapped her palm against the counter. Because I was your mother. No, I said, because I allowed it. Her face changed then. Not softer, not sadder, smaller. Like she had suddenly seen a door in me close and realized she was on the wrong side of it. Saturday came clear and cold. Blue sky, thin wind, the kind of weather that makes every edge look sharper. I cleaned the living room, not out of respect for anyone, out of discipline. I wanted no confusion between mess and conflict. No one was going to blame tension on clutter. At 1:47, Denise arrived carrying a store-bought pie she was too nervous to leave in the car. At 1:55, my uncle and aunt came in smelling like winter coats, peppermints, and old awkwardness. At 1:58, my half-brother Sean joined by FaceTime from Arizona because, apparently, digital distance still comes with full confidence. At 2:01, the two churchwomen showed up uninvited with those tight little smiles women wear when they expect to watch somebody get put back in place. My mother floated through the room in a cream cardigan and pearl earrings. Ready for sympathy. Ready for witnesses. Ready, I think, to enjoy my correction. I had set everything on the dining table. 3 neat stacks. Certified deed copies. Payment records. Tax documents. Formal notice. And 1 framed photo of my father, because I wanted him in the room in the only way left to me. Nobody sat at first. My mother made a show of remaining standing, too. I don't know what kind of performance this is, she said, but I will not be humiliated in my own home. Then you may want to listen closely. Denise looked between us. My uncle rubbed his jaw. One of the churchwomen whispered, Lord. I did not raise my voice. That mattered to me. I had spent years being described as emotional any time I showed ordinary reaction. I was not handing anybody that shortcut. For the last 22 years, I said, my mother has lived in this house. During those same 22 years, she has represented herself to family, friends, neighbors, and now a realtor as the owner of this property. She is not Victoria. Please don't interrupt me until I'm done. I've had plenty of practice not interrupting you. My uncle exhaled through his nose. Through the phone, speaker Sean said, Come on, Vicky, don't be like that. Do not call me Vicky. That hit harder than yelling would have. I picked up the certified copy and slid it toward the center of the table. The county seal caught the light. Stamp. Recording number. My name. This property was legally transferred through a protected arrangement after Dad died. Beneficial interest was secured for me as a child. Ownership finalized in my name. Here is the certified deed. Here is the current property record. Here is the ownership chain. Nobody moved for a second. Then Denise stepped closer. My aunt put on her glasses. My mother's lips parted, but nothing came out. My uncle picked up the first document. Read the top line. Read it again. Then looked at me in a way I had never seen before. Not pity. Recognition. This says, Victoria Elaine Mercer. Yes. Recorded owner? Yes. My mother gave a quick laugh that cracked in the middle. That doesn't mean what you think it means. I'm glad you said that. I handed over the trust summary and attorney letter. Here is what it means. Denise took the second page and read silently. Her eyes widened. The churchwomen went very still. Sean leaned closer to his phone camera. My mother lunged for the paper, but my uncle held on to it. Let me see that. It has her name, he said. That was for protection. Temporary. Everybody knew. No, I said. Not temporary. I placed the tax records beside it, then the insurance statements, then the repair invoices. I paid the mortgage. I paid the taxes. I paid the insurance. I paid the repairs. Roof, HVAC, plumbing, fence, HOA, exterminator, water, electric, all of it. My mother blinked hard. Because you lived here. Because I owned here. That sentence had weight. Years of weight. It did not need volume. You can bury a daughter under obligation long enough that she forgets what her own voice sounds like. Then one day she speaks from bedrock. Everything shifts. My mother tried denial first. Your father would never do this to me. He didn't. He protected me. I was his wife. And I was his child. I kept this family together. You stayed in a house you did not have to leave, I said. Those are not the same thing. She looked around the room, searching for moral backup. After everything I sacrificed, I watched Denise lower her eyes, watched one churchwoman take a slow step back, watched my uncle scan the payment records with a face that kept changing shape. When somebody sees the truth late, shame makes them look tired first. Sean tried to step in. Okay, even if technically, not technically, he stopped. Legally, financially, factually, for years. Then I handed over the final packet. My mother saw the heading before she actually read it, and all the color drained from her face. Notice to vacate. She dropped it on the table like it burned. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. You would put your own mother out? I would stop letting my mother pretend I'm disposable in my own home. Where am I supposed to go? There it was. Not apology, not accountability. Logistics. Because beneath all the performance, some part of her understood exactly what paper means. I arranged a furnished short-term rental for 60 days, I said. It's clean. Single story. Close to your church and your doctor. The first month is paid. After that, it's yours to handle. The silence after that did not feel cinematic. It felt practical, like everybody in the room was doing math inside themselves. My aunt covered her mouth. Denise sat down without asking. One of the church women whispered, "Oh." My mother stared at me like she had never seen my face before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe she had only ever seen the version of me that made her life easier. You planned this. I prepared. You waited. Yes. To do this in front of family? No, I said. You brought family into it when you told them I was trying to take what was yours. Her shoulders tightened. So this is revenge. I thought about that word. The way people reach for it whenever a woman stops absorbing damage quietly. No, I said. This is the end of a lie. She tried anger next. Hotter. Louder. You ungrateful little... Marion, my uncle snapped. She swung toward him. Don't Marion me. She has been waiting to shame me. My uncle looked down at the documents, then at her, then at me. Did you know she was paying all of it? Nobody answered. Because some questions are really indictments with better manners. My mother switched to tears. She was good at tears. Not fake exactly. Strategic. They arrived when consequences did, not when harm was being done. I gave my life to this family. You gave your life to controlling the story. How dare you? How dare you bring a realtor into my house and tell strangers you were going to sell it? The churchwomen stared at the floor. I could almost hear their future retellings rearranging themselves. Not because they had suddenly become good, because clear paper makes gossip less flexible. Then my mother reached for the framed photo of my father and clutched it to her chest. He would be ashamed of you. That one hit. Of course it hit. She knew exactly where the bruise lived. But pain and persuasion are not the same thing. I looked at the photo in her hands, then at her. Dad is the reason this house was protected. Her fingers tightened around the frame. He knew I would need something in writing if the people closest to me ever decided memory mattered more than truth. Denise started crying then. Quietly. Not for my mother. For herself, maybe? For all the years she had sat at my table, eaten my food, and let my mother call me a guest in my own life. My aunt sat beside her. Sean looked like he wanted to disconnect. I almost wished he would. Then I changed my mind. No. Stay. Let everybody stay. Let everybody look. If humiliation grows in public, sometimes healing has to begin there too. My mother made one last move. Revision. This was always supposed to be ours. It was never yours. I raised you here. Under my roof. I made this a home. I paid for you to keep saying that. That was the line that broke whatever sympathy was left in the room. Not because it was cruel, because it was clean. A fact can feel merciless when someone has spent years hiding inside fog. My uncle put the papers down carefully. Marion, he said, quieter now, did you really bring a realtor here? She did not answer. He looked at the notice, at the deed, at me, then rubbed his forehead and said something I had not expected. Victoria, you should have said something sooner. I almost laughed, not because he was wrong, because that sentence always comes after a woman survives long enough to prove she was telling the truth. Sooner. As if sooner would have been heard. As if sooner would not have been called disrespect. As if sooner would not have become another example of me being difficult. I know, I said. That was all. Because I was not spending my clean ending on everybody else's delayed guilt. My mother refused to take the notice, so I set it beside her purse. You have 30 days for the formal transition, 60 days of support in the rental I arranged. Movers come next Friday if you want them. If you choose not to cooperate, my attorney handles the next step. Attorney? Yes. She shook her head slowly. You got a lawyer against your mother. No, I said. I got a lawyer for myself. That distinction changed something inside me. Small, permanent. After that, the meeting dissolved. People stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. Denise offered to help pack. My aunt asked quietly if the rental really was close to the church. I said yes. The church women left first, carrying scandal and correction in equal measure. Sean muttered something about figuring things out later and disconnected before I could respond. My mother stood at the table longer than anyone else, looking at the deed, looking at my name, looking, I think, at all the years she had stood in the center of every photo without realizing the floor beneath her feet had never belonged to her. Finally, she said, very softly, "You let me believe." No, I said. You chose to believe what was useful. She recoiled like I had physically touched her. Then she took her purse, left the notice behind, and went upstairs. The next week felt like a storm after landfall. No lightning, just debris. My mother alternated between rage and sainthood. 1 hour she was slamming cabinet doors and calling me cold. The next, she was at the kitchen table, telling Denise on speakerphone that she was trying to preserve the relationship. She told everybody I had become hard. I never argued. Sometimes hard is just what steady looks like after years of being pressed. The movers came Friday at 9 in the morning. 2 men from a local company in navy shirts. Polite, efficient, professional. I had arranged them myself. So, of course, my mother stood in the hallway I had repainted twice and said, "Be careful with my antiques." I stayed in the living room with my laptop and a legal pad. Inventory list. Box counts. Utilities transfer checklist. Forwarding address confirmation. I was not enjoying her pain. That matters. I was enjoying the end of mine. There is a difference between cruelty and relief. When they carried out her china cabinet, the wall behind it showed a pale rectangle where the paint had been protected from sunlight for 15 years. I stood there after they took it and ran my hand across the difference. Warm paint, cool paint, old outline, new air. That is what reclaiming a life feels like at first. Not fireworks. Negative space. My mother paused on the front steps before getting into Denise's SUV. For 1 second, I thought she might turn and say something true. Not nice. Not soft. Just true. Instead, she said, "Do not expect me to forgive this. I didn't ask you to." She looked stunned. Maybe because that had always been the engine between us. Her outrage. My reaching. Her withdrawal. My repair. This time I gave her none of it. She got into the SUV. The door shut. The lock clicked. The car pulled away. And for the first time in 22 years, I stood inside my house and did not brace for her voice from another room. The silence was not empty. It was mine. That first night alone, I did not celebrate. I took a trash bag upstairs and started with the hallway linen closet. Expired sunscreen, 32 motel soaps, church bulletins from 2014, receipts for things I had paid for and she had filed under her own categories in that handwriting that always tried to organize the world into her ownership. I threw out what needed throwing out, boxed what needed storage, donated 6 coats she had not worn in years but refused to let go of because, according to her, good wool should stay in the family. I opened windows. Even though it was cold, I wanted the house to breathe differently. Over the next few weeks, I changed small things first. I took down the giant framed family collage in the entryway and replaced it with one black and white photo of my father smiling into sunlight. I repainted the kitchen from her chosen beige to a clean, quiet white. I moved the coffee maker from the corner she guarded like territory to the center island where I actually wanted it. I bought myself new dishes, not because I needed them, because I was tired of eating from plates my mother once described as too good for everyday use, while expecting me to live on emotional leftovers. I invited Megan from work over for dinner. Just Megan. Pasta. Salad. Grocery store cheesecake. Nothing fancy. But when she stepped inside, she looked around and said, "This place feels so much lighter." Lighter. I almost cried. Not because of the word itself, because somebody noticed without me having to explain. We ate at the same dining table where the deed had sat. I told her the broad version. Not every humiliation. Not every bruise. Just enough. She listened. Really listened. Then she said, "You know this was never about a house." She was right. It was about occupancy of self. About what happens when somebody lives inside your authority so long they start charging you rent for breathing. My mother called twice in the first month. The first call was practical. She wanted me to locate 2 missing casserole dishes. I told her I had packed what was in the kitchen and sent the rest to storage. The second call was softer, which made it more dangerous. She asked if I had eaten. Then she said the rental felt lonely. I believed her. Loneliness was probably the first honest feeling she had let herself have in years. Still, honesty does not erase consequence. "I'm sorry you're uncomfortable," I said. "That's all you have to say?" "It's what I have to say today." She hung up. Boundary is not always a slammed door. Sometimes it is a sentence with no extra furniture. One Sunday in May, my uncle came by with donuts from Dunkin' and a face full of apology he was too proud to phrase elegantly. We sat on the back patio, the same patio my mother used to talk about expanding. He looked at the herb pots lined along the fence and said, "You made it look like you." I smiled. Then he stared down at his coffee for a while and finally said, "I should have known." Maybe. Your daddy trusted paper because he knew feelings get hijacked. That line stayed with me. Feelings get hijacked. Yes, especially in families where the loudest person mistakes possession for love. Then he told me something else. After my father died, my mother had asked more than once whether the house could be simplified into her name for convenience. My grandfather shut it down every single time. I sat there staring at my cup. My uncle rubbed his thumb across the donut box and said, "He saw further than most of us." So did my father. That was the grief underneath everything. He had protected me from beyond a year he never got to live. There is a kind of love that still builds walls around you after the heart that carried it is gone. By summer, the house no longer felt like a stage where I had been miscast. It felt inhabited by me. I changed the front hall light fixture, planted lavender near the porch, played music while I cooked, and never once turned it down to avoid commentary drifting in from another room. On the 4th of July, I hosted the barbecue. My barbecue. Not as a performance, as proof. Megan came. Denise came too, quieter than usual, carrying potato salad and an apology she still didn't know how to say out loud. That was all right. Not every repair starts with a speech. Some start with showing up correctly. We ate in the backyard under string lights I had chosen myself. No one asked where my mother sat. No one called it her house. When fireworks started in the distance, I stood at the sliding door and watched my reflection in the glass. Not smaller, not waiting, just present. Do you know what visibility feels like after years of being edited out of your own life? It feels suspicious at first, like kindness from a stranger, like a bed that doesn't squeak because no one else has been pressing it out of shape, like opening the freezer and finding only food you bought because nobody is rearranging your life while you sleep. There are women who win by being loud. There are women who win by leaving. I won by staying still long enough to understand the shape of the cage, then unlocking it with the key that had been mine the whole time. That is not weakness. That is strategy, wearing patience's coat. 3 months after she moved out, my mother asked to come by for the rest of her winter clothes. I agreed. Daylight only. 1 hour. She arrived in a smaller car than before. Less polished, more careful. She stood in the doorway and looked around like somebody visiting a museum of choices she used to narrate. The walls were brighter. The entryway was cleaner. The giant collage was gone. She noticed all of it. You changed things. Yes. Fast. Not really. She looked into the kitchen. At the new dishes drying by the sink. At the vase of grocery store sunflowers on the island. For once, she did not correct a single thing. She gathered her clothes in silence. Then in the hallway, she paused. Denise says people are talking. People always were. You think I deserved this. I held her gaze. I think you depended on me while diminishing me. She turned back toward me. And for a second I saw something almost unguarded in her face. Not villainy, not innocence, just age meeting truth later than it wanted to. I didn't know how to be anything else after your father died. There are sentences you wait years to hear, and when they finally arrive, they come too small, too late. Still, I respected that one. I know. You made me feel unnecessary. No, I said. I stopped letting you make me feel owned. She nodded once, barely. Then she carried the last bag to her car. That was the closest thing to an honest conversation we had ever had. Not healing, not reunion, just reality, finally speaking in its own clothes. People ask whether I regret not exposing her sooner. Sometimes I do. Mostly on nights when I think about all the years I spent shrinking inside rooms I legally controlled. The birthdays I cleaned for while she accepted compliments. The Thanksgivings where I carved turkey in a kitchen I paid to renovate while relatives praised your mother's beautiful home. The Christmas mornings where my gift to myself was swallowing the truth so the day would stay quiet. Yes, I regret some of that. But regret is not the whole story. I also understand the woman I was while I was living it. The 22-year-old exhausted from work and school. The 26-year-old too embarrassed to bring a man inside. The 29-year-old hearing her mother promise away a house she did not own and still not quite ready to detonate the script. She was not foolish. She was surviving a kind of domination that leaves no clean bruise. And when she was ready, she did not flail. She documented. She prepared. She ended it clean. That matters. A clean ending is a kind of mercy you give yourself when nobody ever taught you mercy without leverage. Last month, I finally cleaned out the bottom drawer of the dining room credenza. Old birthday candles, loose batteries, menus from restaurants that had already closed. And underneath all of it, the copy of the deed I had slid across the table that first morning while my mother rolled her suitcase over my floor like she still owned Dawn. I sat down with it in my lap, ran my fingers over the raised county seal, listened to the quiet. Morning light reached across the room exactly the way it had that day. But it landed differently now. Not on tension, on ownership, not just legal, spiritual, emotional, mine. I put the deed into a new fireproof box with the rest of the house records, locked the drawer, and stood in the kitchen for a while with no one else's voice in my head. Just the hum of the refrigerator, just the soft tick of the wall clock, just sunlight on clean counters and a house that no longer had to pretend about who it belonged to. I did not steal power. I stopped hiding the truth. And before I finish, let me say one thing. If you have ever had to sit quietly inside a lie just to survive it long enough to end it clean, then you already know this was never only about property. It was about being erased slowly, then seen. If that hit somewhere personal for you, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments what part stayed with you the longest. Because sometimes the stories people admit out loud are the same stories somebody else has been carrying alone in silence.